This is a Peralta News special report. Recently, evidence has surfaced that Richard Aoki may have been an FBI informant. In 2008, we interviewed Richard Aoki at length, and here is his story in his words.
The struggle for freedom, justice, and equality transcends racial and ethnic barriers.
Was he an FBI informant? Or a committed revolutionary? Here's Richard Aoki's story in his own words. This is a Peralta News special report. I'm Jeff Heyman. In 2008, Peralta TV produced an award-winning documentary on the origins of the Black Panther Party at Merritt College. As part of the documentary, we interviewed Richard Aoki, who was active with the Panthers at their formation. He later became an administrator, counselor, and teacher at the Peralta Community College District. Now, in light of the allegations that he may have worked with the FBI, we have decided to air Peralta TV's entire interview with Richard Aoki. Was Richard Aoki an FBI informer, as recent allegations suggest, or was he a committed revolutionary? And now part 2 of our interview with Richard Aoki.
I was living in Berkeley. I began going to the Berkeley demonstrations and forums and classes that they had there off campus, not the UC classes themselves, but mostly educational classes given by anarchists, democratic socialists, communists. So they didn't call themselves communists, they had front groups going, Trotskyists. There were some Maoists there. They were what we would call the old left, the more traditional radical groups. The new left hadn't been born yet. They were still playing around in high school, hadn't quite hit Berkeley. Meanwhile, I was advised by a lot of friends and co-workers that I should seriously think about getting a formal education. And since I was eligible for admission to UC Berkeley at the time, because of my Berkeley High background, I thought, well, maybe I better get an education, get my degree, get a job, get married, have my 2.5 kids, and move out to the suburbs, the American dream. Meanwhile, I said, well, if I go to Merritt College, I could save money because Merritt College has a university transfer track, where if you complete 2 years at Merritt College, you can transfer to UC Berkeley, almost guaranteed. And since I was UC Berkeley eligible, if I didn't like Merritt College, I could transfer anytime I wanted. So I thought, well, why not? So in 1964, I became a full-time student at Merritt College, quit my union job, got a lower paying part-time job, but my fiance was working at a good office job, and we were planning our little life together there. And my first year at Merritt College, I declared my major as chemistry. Yeah. Well, contrary to popular opinion, all Orientals don't have that gene in them that makes them good in science. That chemistry beat my butt. But at the same time, I had to also take German because UC Berkeley required German as a foreign language for their chemistry majors, since most of the significant chemical abstracts were written in German at that time. Because I wondered, what the heck do I have to take? I have to take a foreign language, but why German? And that's why I had to take German. I don't know if the name Lloyd Baisdorfer means anything to Jeff, but Lloyd Baisdorfer was a German instructor, later became dean, almost president, but excuse me, he was my German instructor the first year. Now that turned out to be very handy because as I was studying Marxism on my own, I discovered that I really couldn't understand Marx unless I dealt with Hegel. When I read Hegel in the English, his Phenomenology of the Mind, I couldn't understand it. So I figured that it was a bad translation. So I got my little Langenscheid's German-English dictionary and got Hegel. Since I was close at Berkeley, I could pick up anything. You know, I got a copy of Hegel, Phenomenology of the Mind, from a bookstore in Berkeley in German, and had Lloyd sort of help me along when I couldn't understand what I was reading. Meanwhile, as I was getting seated at Merritt College, I ran into two guys whose families I knew, well, really three. The first was Bobby Seale, and Bobby had been in the Air Force and had gotten a less than honorable discharge for going upside the head of an officer for calling him the N-word. But he'd been in the military, and he was a pre-engineering student. Then I ran into Huey Newton. I knew the Newton family. I knew Melvin Newton. He was my age. Huey's a little younger than I am, about 4 years younger. Huey was in pre-law, and he had to be because he was a wannabe gangster. Had to have all the wits about him, all the edges that he could have because he was getting busted right and left. Then there was David Hilliard, who was a longshoreman at the time. He had a good job. African Americans in West Oakland did well by being in the Longshoremen's Union, thanks to Harry Bridges. May have been a communist, but he opened up the Longshoremen's Union for blacks on the West Coast and Orientals in Hawaii. Carl Yoneda, one of the leading Japanese Americans in the Longshoremen's Union, was a staunch communist. And I sort of got to know him by reputation, and he was sort of a minor role model in the sense, well, there's somebody who's Oriental that was a communist. Well, that's interesting. Anyway, by my second year at Merritt, I had become a revolutionary socialist, self-proclaimed, yes. And I founded the Socialist Discussion Club, where I invited all the big-time revolutionaries from the old left in Berkeley to come to Merritt to speak, because I wanted them to throw their ideas out to me and fellow students here. I managed to get a bunch of younger people who were interested, but weren't as committed, which was good, and I had a little thing going. Meanwhile, Bobby had become head of the Seoul Students Advisory Council, a Negro group. And because Bobby was head of the Seoul Students Advisory Council and I was head of the head of the Socialist Discussion Club, we met at these inter-club council meetings and stuff. Well, there were fraternities and sororities at Merritt College, these young wannabes, They weren't good enough to go to Berkeley. They started their own things at Merritt College. And it was kind of humorous looking at the class related phenomena at Merritt College, because I had become aware of California's master plan for higher education that was passed in 1960, where the roles of the various colleges and universities were somewhat delineated, where the University of California system was somewhat designed for the top 10% of the graduates from the high schools. The state universities was designed for the top 1/3 of the graduates. And the community colleges were sort of the catch-all for everybody else. However, the curriculum for the community colleges was not exclusive. They did have that component for university transfer, state and UC system, alongside the vocational and technical programs. And that appealed to me because it sort of made sense. Not everybody's slated to go to the big university. And I don't know whether the legislators and educators that designed the master plan had a purely class and race bias, but Merritt College, in a way, was called an end stopper, that everybody now has their own college to go to. The white people got the universities, the working class people got the state universities, and the ends got the community colleges. And that was a joke among us, you know, we're at the stopper school. Now, here is what's significant that I would like to comment on. Merritt College at that time was also known as the Little Harvard of the East Bay. Merritt College transferred more students to the University of California than any other community college in Northern California. One had to do with proximity. Another reason was the quality of its faculty. Having been a lifelong educator, it seems axiomatic to me that buildings alone don't make a fine institution. It's the faculty. And I'm somewhat biased, having been a faculty member for 30 years. But if you look at, and I'm sorry that Norbert isn't here, if you look at the faculty of Merritt College at the time in the 50s and 60s, it was an outstanding faculty. I sort of studied it when I first got here because I wondered, you know, I went to Berkeley High. I had some good teachers there. They gave me a good foundation, and had I continued at McClymonds, I probably would have ended up in prison. But Berkeley High sort of stimulated my intellectual growth, which I then sort of picked up when I hit Merritt.
We think that this educational process is necessary, and it's the people that will cause the revolution, and it's the people that will cause the change in the country. The Black Panther Party is simply the vanguard of the revolution, and we plan to teach the people the strategy and the necessary tools to liberate themselves.
There was a lot of interchange, cross-cultural learning. I learned more about black nationalism and taught as much as I could to Bobby about Marxism from where I was coming. And then Bobby invited me to a black nationalist conference in San Francisco in the summer of 1966. I was the only non-black there, but he got me in to talk about concentration camps and anti-war stuff, because there was Ernie Allen was fighting the draft at the time, and there was a Free Ernie Allen committee, and being ex-military, I could give a lecture on the military. Then we met Stokely Carmichael, and because he showed up at this conference and talked about black power. Huey and Bobby were enthralled with that. By October of '66, that winter, they came up with the idea of the Black Panther Party. They ran it by me. I said, it sounds okay to me. The Maoist twist, I kind of threw that one in. I said, well, so far, the most advanced Marxists I've run across are the Maoists in China. And I think they can be compatible because they're not white. You know, Mao is Chinese, and he's talking to Asia, Africa, and Latin America. He just issued a speech in a declaration in 1963 to speak about the Negro question in the United States and how his party supports the struggle for Negroes to liberate themselves. Well, the civil rights struggle had petered out by '66 because of the death of Martin Luther King and the disillusionment of the civil rights people. I kind of played with civil rights, but could never buy the nonviolence part of it. The only civil rights group I supported was SNCC, and that, I must have had good political instincts, because Stokely and H. Rapp took over SNCC from James Forman in '65. At the same time, Robert F. Williams of the NAACP in Monroe County, North Carolina, had armed his group and were fighting the Klan, similar to that of the Deacons for Justice in Bogalusa, Louisiana. They were fighting the Klan. And it became obvious that self-defense would be the best way to counteract the racist things that were going on. This preaching and nonviolent stuff, turning the other cheek ain't gonna work. When Bobby and Huey came out with their 10-point program, they ran it by me. I said, it looked good, and so I signed off on it. And then Huey said, we want you to join, Richard. I said, say what? Yeah. I said, I know you two are crazy, you know, but are you guys colorblind? You know, I'm not black. That's when Huey came back with one of the most significant statements he's ever made that I remember. He said, I know you're not black, Richard, but I'm asking you to join because the struggle for freedom, justice, and equality transcends racial and ethnic barriers. I said, oh, heck, yeah, he's right there if you look at it from that perspective. So I said, count me in on it. That's when I was appointed branch captain of the Berkeley chapter. And then we embarked on the shotgun patrols, because as we distributed the 10-point program through the community, we weren't just a bunch of talkers. We said, look, this is a 10-point program. Now, what, I mean, includes decent housing, good education, medical facilities, etc. And what do the people in the community think is the most important? They said police brutality. And that was a sensitive, had been a sensitive issue in the city of Oakland. Because when I was growing up in West Oakland in 1945-46, the Oakland Police Department was put under receivership by the State Attorney General's Office for Corruption and Brutality. And so I was a witness to all of the malfeasance of the Oakland Police Department, and I could understand why the people in the community were so hostile about this issue, so sensitive. So we took over a program that started in Los Angeles by a group called CAPS, Community Action Patrol, that used to go around, or started going around, photographing and tape recording police encounters in the community. They got their asses kicked. Their cameras were busted up, their tape recorders were confiscated. The reason for that is there was no backup. We did the very same thing, but we had backup because we were armed. We had shotguns, rifles, pistols. Yeah, you could try and take our cameras and tape recorders. We'll blow your heads off. Private property, don't mess with it. Plus, Huey, being so well-versed in the nuances of the law, could get right there on the street and tell the cops exactly what we were doing. According to Penal Code Section 28 and 39-A, whatever, we have a right. And as long as we stand 20 feet away, we're not obstructing, we're not doing anything. And according to the other penal code, whatever it is, we got the right to carry these guns with bullets in the chamber. Man, you don't go running around carrying weapons with no ammunition in it. Now, because I'd been in the military and I'd been a sort of amateur gun collector, I didn't have an arsenal. An arsenal is 10 weapons of any one make or caliber. I had a little collection, but they all happened to be military weapons, because military weapons are simple. That's why they're military. You can take a peasant or a worker and give them an AK-47, you know, it's simply made, very sturdy, you know, simple to assemble, disassemble, whatever. Anyway, my collection included Army 45s, M1 carbines, your standard 12-gauge shotguns. And Bobby and Huey knew I had a little stash of, I didn't have that many, but enough to arm the first half dozen or so who joined the party. And then I found one new member, young thug right off the streets out of Riley's Pool Hall. I could show him one time how to assemble and disassemble a weapon, and he could do it blindfolded. So he then became our armorer. You know, that's what education's all about. You don't know where potential is. And there I had a group of new members, and I'd say, you know, who thinks they know something? You know, show me. Well, you're good. You're getting A+ for this. Yeah, demonstrate. And then there's the political part. Each one teach one. Okay, so I knew something. I just passed it on to the next one who was bright enough to be able to pass it on to the next one. So because of our shotgun patrols, that's what we call them, when the Denzel Dow was killed in North Richmond, and his mother wanted to speak in a park in North Richmond, and the police wouldn't give her a permit. She came to us and said, we heard that you protect the community against the police. Would you protect us? We said we would. Now, historically, North Richmond, West Oakland have fought each other. Even the whites who used to live there before the war in both West Oakland and Richmond used to go to it. Today, Orientals, or Asian Americans, the Mian population in East Oakland and the ones in Richmond are killing each other. I've been passing the word out, man, this is double genocide. You know, there aren't too many Mians from Southeast Asia. What are you guys doing killing each other over turf issues? Now, during the period the Black Panther Party was active in Oakland, the juvenile crime rate actually went down. I kept track of crime statistics in Oakland because I had to know the Oakland Police Department and all that stuff. That was part of my job as field marshal. And I have seen where the crime statistics for homicides, robberies, armed robberies actually went down during that period. Now, why? Why? Because these young thugs that were on the streets, I mean, I wasn't that far removed, nor was Huey from that grouping, because at one point Huey and I entertained ideas of becoming pimps, because one of our role models was one of the most notorious pimps in Oakland. He was a bad dude. He's still around, not in town. Too many people are gunning for him now. But when you give hope and you give another alternative to people that don't have that hope, don't have that alternative, you can produce positive results. And what happened is that these young thugs that had been around shooting each other up, suddenly East Oakland, West Oakland became friends because historically they've been at each other's throats. Once we did the North Richmond escapade where 30 of us held off 300 cops, including 2 helicopters, we became heroes in North Richmond, the whole Dow family, there were 7 brothers in the Dow family, joined the party and established the Richmond branch of the Black Panther Party. So that's an example of where walking the walk after doing the talk paid dividends. And for a while, the tensions between the police and the community kind of simmered until the incident with Huey, where he had to defend himself and was being railroaded to prison, erupted, which then became a national and even international struggle. Up to that point, we were dealing with issues on a criminal basis, if you want to look at it that way. But once the issue came up concretely in Huey's case, it became a political issue, and much of the credit for that should go to Eldridge Cleaver, because he recognized from the beginning that what happened in Oakland was really a political act, and that it should be treated as such, and the defense of Huey should be done on a political level. And I bought into that because I was right there, and said, well, this is what we're going to have to do. And the struggle to save Huey then saw a tremendous increase in the size of the party, to the extent that at one point the party had 5,000 members and 43 branches throughout the country, and an international office in Algiers. I was the first minister of education, not in the formal sense. It was more restricted to political education, and the fact that I was also a student at Berkeley. There were, I believe, 4 ministers of education. George Murray, who was in the Black Panther Party and was involved in the San Francisco state strike, became the second one. The third one was Messiah Hewitt, who died. And then the fourth and final one was Erica Huggins. I think you interviewed her. But my role as Minister of Information was to help set up the internal education classes, where we concentrated on the writings of relevant African American revolutionaries. And the first primer we used was the autobiography of Malcolm X, because of the fact that it was so easy to read. The narrative part of his book is just fantastic. You can just go right through it. The other works that were studied were more advanced, such as Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, and then more obscure black nationalist type writings, and Marxist stuff that was somewhat simplified, and then going into the Red Book. The Red Book was a natural for studying because of the fact that it was so concise and it was so portable and so easily recognizable. And it's true that there were financial aspects regarding the Red Book, because it was so novel that radicals at Berkeley, especially the New Left, were hungry for that type of enlightenment. And I didn't view it as much for the monetary end of it as for the political lessons to be drawn from that particular work.
That was part 2 of our interview with Richard Aoki from 2008, when Peralta TV talked to him as part of our documentary on the Black Panther Party. Join us for part 3, where Richard Aoki describes in detail his work with the Black Panther Party.